Hey, welcome back to another episode of Bulletproof TV. I'm Greg.
And I'm Matt.
And in the previous episodes, we've been helping beginners choose a gun that's proper for them. Size, weight, caliber for either CCW or home defense. What do you think is the next episode we should do?
Well, once you select the firearm you want to use, you want to learn how to use it well. So fundamentals of marksmanship naturally comes next.
Perfect. And the snow's melted. It's a nice Saturday. We're going to go to the range, finally.
All firearms in this episode have been safety checked and cleared. No ammunition is allowed on the indoor set during filming.
Hey, welcome back. So Matt, fundamentals of marksmanship. You're a police and military trainer for years. Specifically, what does that mean?
Now be careful, because a .44 Magnum has quite a kick.
Damn, that was fun.
So the fundamentals are those little things we do that allow us to shoot well, accurately, repeatably, consistently. And they're broken down into grip, stance, sight alignment, sight picture, trigger control, follow through, and breathing. We'll talk about these fundamentals and how to apply them properly. We will tell you about a way to shoot, not the way to shoot. There's other fundamentals and techniques that are out there, but the ones that we're going to deliver here today on this episode are what the vast majority of people are using and find success with.
Right. All right, so the first fundamental is grip. Tell us about grip.
So with grip, the most important piece of grip is to get the web of your hand. That's that area between your index finger, your trigger finger, and your thumb. The web of the hand, high up in the tang of the pistol. I always want to keep my trigger finger in a safe position, and that means purchase on the receiver, not floating out in space or on the side of the trigger guard. Anytime you're picking up a handgun, you want to ensure it's clear, safe, and empty anyway. So you're going to verify it even if you know you put it away empty. So this becomes a good default grip to go to because it's safe and it's mechanically correct for shooting. So from there, I put my support hand on the opposite side of the handgun with my thumbs forward, pointing forward. And in the training world, we always talk about how it's important to say what we need to do, what we need to not do. So one of the things you see on TV, I think this is a big TJ Hooker grip, is the teacup grip. Used to see this with wheel guns back in the day, where I've got one hand cup and saucer underneath the other. I would stay away from that grip specifically. Doesn't apply for the majority here with a pistol. And even if I was running a revolver, I would not be running it with a teacup grip. There's best practices out there, so I would avoid that. So as high up as you can get your hands, or as high up as you can get it, as close as you can to the bore axis, the better. That will allow you to manage recoil and put more accurate shots down range. We want to keep our wrists under tension and straight ahead, and allow isometric tension to balance out the pressure between the left and the right side of the pistol. We want our fingers up in front of the front strap here to overlock with the fingers on the hand that's on the grip. As far as the amount of pressure we use, high percentage. What most people are doing is 30% pressure or thereabouts with their strong hand, and they clamp down 70% pressure with the support hand. So that support hand really locks the pistol down. So a strong hand in pistol shooting is a bit of a misnomer. When we say strong hand, the amount of pressure you should use would be equivalent to that you would use to shake a lady's hand you're meeting for the first time. That allows you to have independent movement of your trigger finger. And as we said in earlier episodes, accuracy is made and maintained by being able to press your trigger finger independently, not moving any of the other muscles in your hand. But if your hand is tight, You try to move your trigger finger independently, you'll get sympathetic reaction from the other fingers in your hand.
You see that a lot. Guys are crushing the grip with their strong hand, and they lose the dexterity of their finger, and they're moving the sights out of alignment as they're trying to squeeze that trigger.
Right, and no one gets out and shoots enough. It's never enough, right? But the groups are never small enough, and the shots are never fast enough. But not everyone has the ability to get out on the range weekly or monthly. For some people, it's twice a year. So this technique works great for those people. And like we said, this is a technique, not the technique. There are people that run the crush grip. They tend to be the people that train more often, and they can have a lot of success with that. Check out the Bigger Circle at Seeklander and Latham system. That is another system, but not one we're going to dig deep into today.
So high on the gun, complete coverage of the grip, get that drumstick up and cover the portion that's uncovered on your grip, and have enough dexterity in your finger.
Correct.
Good.
So you remember as a kid, your parents are pushing you through a store in a shopping cart, and you can just point at something on a shelf and say, "Mom, I want that. Dad, I want that."
Not that milk. That milk.
We're pretty well hardwired for those kinds of reactions as far as hand-eye coordination goes. So if you can get your thumbs pointed down range towards your target,
It's a natural.
you can point out, and you're pretty much there, right? Like,
Right.
At that point, all you got to do is just verify that your sights are properly aligned. And with practice, you'll be able to do this. You can pretty much align your sights.
So tension on your thumbs. What do you consider the proper tension with your thumbs?
So again, 70-30 for this system, where my support hand, 70% of the pressure, where my support hand would apply 70% pressure, and isometric tension from my, what would that be? And isometric tension from my arms. I can see already this is going to be an outtake. Helps keep the pressure equal on both sides. Just remember, the grip allows you to move your trigger finger independently. It's got to be light enough to do that. And for some people, that might be a different amount of pressure. So your mileage may vary, but take it to the range and check it out.
All right, Matt, so based on what we talked about already, let's build the grip, the proper grip.
Okay, I'm gonna take the web of my hand, place it high in the tang, with my index finger getting purchased on the receiver here in a good safe location. My support side hand is gonna wrap around alternating. It's going to alternate over the fingers on the strong side hand, thumbs forward. And I can press out.
So with that nice tight grip, you can see recoil. Now, if you go to an improper grip and have the right, and have space in here between the tang, what are we going to get? We're going to get
A whole lot more
a
movement.
whole lot more movement. Exactly.
So remember, the arc of movement's never going to be zero, but we want to greatly reduce it with a good grip and all the other fundamentals.
So Matt, let me ask you, you described that grip perfectly. Why do we have that type of a grip? Why are we putting the isometric tension in and using like a clamshell grip? What does that achieve?
So it helps us manage recoil and get back on target. If you have recoil to manage, remember there's pressure and energy moving through that system as you're firing it. You have to manage that recoil, you have to manage that gas pressure. There's gas pressure moving back towards you. There's gas coming out of the ejection port that moves that gun down into your left, assuming your ejection port's on the right. And the muzzle's gonna wanna flip up from the bullet leaving the muzzle. So if you can manage that, and your grip, if there's a good grip you can use to help manage that, this is the grip you would use to help manage that.
Right.
And again, we talk about what to do, what not to do. We're not advocating for locking your arms out completely. There's going to be movement, but that movement should be from your elbow forward.
Gives a nice shock absorber effect.
Yes, and you get your second sight picture after you press your shot off.
So we worked on grip. We've got a nice solid grip. Gonna control recoil straight back. What's next? Stance?
Yes, so stance would be the next fundamental. We want to have a good athletic stance, aggressive enough to manage recoil. One mnemonic we give our trainees to help them remember that is nose over toes. If you can manage your recoil from your natural point of aim with a slightly staggered stance, meaning support side foot 4 to 6 inches ahead of your strong side foot, weight on the balls of your feet, similar stance you'd take if you were getting ready to throw a punch, make a tackle, shoot a takedown. It's a good athletic stance. Yeah, so again, with natural point of aim, you want to be somewhat relaxed. You see a lot of Steel Challenge shooters line up on the stop plate and shut their eyes, point their gun out, and then open them back up just to see where their natural point of aim would be. We want the gun to work for us, so we put it in our stance in a place where it works best for us to manage recoil and make accurate shots. Again, you establish your line of sight, get into your stance, and bring your sights up through your line of sight, not the other way around.
Perfect. All right, so the next thing is going to be stance. Obviously, we don't want to be square to the target. We want to build that good athletic stance. How do you recommend a stance?
So instead of having my toes on a straight line, I want to have a staggered stance with my support side foot 4 to 6 inches ahead of my strong side foot, knees bent, weight on the balls of my feet. And again, if I punch out in this position, I shouldn't get much movement other than from my elbows out. The weight on the balls of my feet, my staggered stance helps me keep my balance.
Now, if you just stood up square to the target and didn't put the weight on the balls of your feet and punch out, what are we looking at? You're going to get, just from recoil.
You can see it's advantageous to keep nose over toes, staggered stance, weight on the balls of your feet.
So Matt, next up is sight alignment, which is pretty critical.
Yes.
Tell us about sight alignment.
So sight alignment is the relationship between the front and the rear sights. We want to line those up to determine our point of aim. And the way that the human eye works is you can only focus on one focal plane at a time. So we line the front and the rear sight up. An example of what that looks like, where your sights are lined up across the top. So we call that equal height. And there's equal space between the rear sight and the front sight. We call that equal light. It's a mnemonic we give for our trainees. Equal height, equal light. This is what it would look like if your eyes focus like a space alien. However, because the human eye can only focus on one focal plane, you need to focus on the front sight, which will make the rear sights a little fuzzy. As long as you have equal height, equal light with your sights, it's acceptable that rear sight would be a little bit fuzzy, a little bit out of focus.
And that's the package you want to hold when you line up to the target.
Right, and that's proper sight alignment. Equal height, equal light with your focus on the front sight focal plane. Nice and sharp on the front sight. It sounds counterintuitive that your target would be a little fuzzy and that your rear sights would be a little bit fuzzy. But that is really best practice for shooting with iron sights.
And that's the problem I think most people have is aligning those sights properly when they now superimpose it over the target.
Right, trust the process. So once you get your sights properly aligned, that's your sight alignment, where you place those properly aligned sights on your target is your sight picture. That'll look like so. Here again, you notice front sight's crystal clear, the rear sight's a little fuzzy, and the target's a little fuzzy, but that is proper sight picture, and for this purpose, we'll say proper sight alignment. When we say proper sight picture, there's different holds that you can properly align your sights and get a sight picture, say a 12 o'clock hold. If you can imagine 12 o'clock on the face of a clock, or a 6 o'clock hold, maybe you'd hold at the bottom. In the precision rifle community, a lot of times you'll be told to cheat 9 o'clock, left edge, something like that. So you're not necessarily, once you get your sights properly aligned, if you need to move them off center, that would be your sight picture. However, for the purposes of pistol shooting, most of the time, your point of aim is going to be your point of impact.
So with that being said, there's a lot of questions. Do I shoot with one eye open? Do I shoot with two eyes open? What's the...
Great question, and we get that all the time. So in the tactical world, the preference is for you to shoot with two eyes open, if for no other reason, because you get a greater field of view and you're responsible for a lot more things. There's a lot going on. Right?
Yeah.
So, however, not everyone's eyes can do that, or if they can, it takes an inordinate amount of practice. So if you can't do that, and for the competitive world, you have to shut your non-dominant eye, that's an acceptable way to shoot. Not ideal, not best practice in the tactical world, but acceptable.
So find what works for you and go with that. And then there's also your dominant eye versus your non-dominant eye. You need to figure out if, as you're aligning the sights, if you're a right-handed shooter, if your right eye is the dominant eye or your left eye is the dominant eye. So figuring that out.
Right, so if you want to give yourself a test, make a little hole between the webs of your left and right hand, put something in focus, keeping both eyes open, move your hands back until they're touching your face. Whichever eye your hands are in front of, whichever eye you're using to look through your hands, is your dominant eye.
Right.
So here again, as Greg gets his sight picture, that front sight should be crystal clear, the rear sight should be fuzzy, and that target down range should be a little bit fuzzy. Human eye only focuses on one focal plane at a time. If you're firing with iron sights, it should be the front sight focal plane. That imaginary plane here where the front sight lies.
Okay, so far we've got grip, stance, sight alignment. What's up next? Trigger control?
Trigger control would be the next and the most important fundamental of marksmanship. We've said it in previous episodes, and the most important thing in shooting, to simplify it, is being able to press a trigger without disturbing your sight alignment and your sight picture. So there's best practices for that as well.
And as simple as that sounds, that is the most important thing, is to keep those sights aligned as you press the trigger. Sounds simple, and it is. It's just doing it.
Right, so again, in the training world, we talk about what to do, what not to do. So just to demonstrate, upside down here, I want to bring my trigger finger straight back and press the trigger without disturbing my sight alignment and sight picture. So if you can visualize that, it looks like linear motion. I learned this from an instructor at a school I went to. It's a click pen, just to help you visualize what a good straight trigger press looks like. Just want to practice moving your finger back and forth without disturbing that pen and its alignment up and down range. So what happens when you don't have a good trigger press, or you're not placed the pad of your finger on the trigger, if you don't have enough finger on the trigger, you'll see what happens is you wind up pushing it to one side when you press. Let me do that again. If you don't have enough finger on the trigger, you'll wind up pushing it when you press the trigger. If you have too much trigger finger in there, you wind up pulling it to the right.
So what about people, everybody has different size hands. Is there a way to place your finger that you have to do it? Or is it to, no matter what your size hand is, get that result, to push it straight back and find where your sweet spot is?
Primarily, it's a little bit of trial and error, but that pad on your finger where you would roll your fingerprints is the spot that you want on that trigger.
Works the best way, most effective. So pull the trigger straight back and keep the sights aligned without moving them off the target when your shot breaks. What else after the shot breaks?
So after the shot breaks, you want follow through. So when we say follow through, we talk about getting good sight picture and sight alignment. So if these are my sights, I'm gonna press the trigger. I'm gonna manage my recoil. And let's say I was aiming at this dime. After I manage my recoil, the muzzle's gonna rise up a little bit. I wanna come right back down on that point of aim where I was before the shot broke. So we get a sight picture, we press the trigger and manage our recoil, and we get a second sight picture. That's follow through.
And you see a lot of guys at the range break the shot and they snatch the gun back right away.
Yeah,
Not a
definitely
good idea.
not a best practice. You want to get that follow through.
Don't fall into the range theatrics.
Yeah, while we have a dime out and we're talking about trigger press, again, the dime drill is a classic. You can put a dime on a pistol and practice pressing the trigger without knocking the dime off.
You did that on the first cut. Look at that.
Not my first rodeo.
And what about breathing?
So breathing, super simple. Just keep breathing. If you stop breathing, that depletes the oxygen in your bloodstream, and the first thing that affects is your visual acuity. So just keep breathing. When we do a deep dive on long gun marksmanship, it's a whole different set of rules for breathing.
Right.
But for pistols, it's real simple.
Just breathe.
And in general, don't overthink this. Get a good grip, line up your sights, and press the trigger without disturbing the sights.
Those are the fundamentals that you want to do. You want to have a good firm grip so that the gun recoils straight back. You want to have a good solid stance so that the recoil isn't pushing you all over. You want to get the sights aligned properly, and you want to squeeze that trigger straight to the rear when the gun goes off, and then have your next sight picture. Is basically what it is. Sounds simple?
Yeah, great
Sometimes
synopsis.
it's hard.
Easier said than done, but like with anything else, the more you practice. And the great thing is there's tons of great dry fire training aids available out there, and just dry fire itself. I think for the pros, they've all said they run usually 10 dry fire trigger presses for every live round they send down range. So that tells you how important that is. Without a live round in your pistol, you can really see what your follow through is. So if you're anticipating recoil or you're not following through, it becomes very evident when you're doing dry fire practice.
Right. And even range practice. Make your practice beneficial. Don't just go with 300 rounds and fire them off like Yosemite Sam, pow, 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 pow. Make every shot count. When you align the sights, take your time, go through the fundamentals in your head, squeeze the trigger, take your time, go slow, and make that practice count.
Yeah, you can only shoot as fast as you can shoot accurately. I think it was Wyatt Earp that said speed is fine, accuracy is final.
Yep.
So here you can see Greg's in a great stance. He's got the proper grip, sights are aligned, and he's on target. Let's talk about the most important fundamental, the trigger press. So Greg is going to prep the trigger, meaning he's going to take the slack out just a little bit. He's going to hit a wall. At that point, he knows any additional pressure is going to set the round off. So he's going to let his front sight get crystal clear and then slowly press the trigger back till he gets a detonation. At this point, the shot would have gone off. The pistol would have cycled. I was going to do that for you, but all right. At this point, he would have got a detonation. The pistol would have cycled. And because his trigger is still pressed to the rear, he's got to get something called trigger reset. So in order to reset the trigger and put it in a position where you can fire again, he's got to come off just enough to get the click. You just heard that audible click. He's still on that wall. Remember, economy of motion drives everything we do. So if we're in the business of pressing the trigger without disturbing the sights, we want to move as little as possible. Greg, go ahead and press that trigger off again without disturbing your sights. Pistol's going to cycle. We're going to come forward until we get the click. And that's trigger reset. You're now in a position where you can fire another round. Let me get a dime. Hold on. Keep rolling.
You got a piece of double-sided tape?
All right, Greg's gonna press the trigger without knocking the dime off. Excellent trigger control. Good job, Greg. Pistol cycles. Greg gets reset, and that second sight picture, and he's ready to apply follow-up shots. Okay, now that we've gone through grip, stance, sight alignment, sight picture, trigger control, follow through, and breathing, we're gonna put it all together and fire a couple shots off. Let's see what that looks like. You're hot. Nice shooting, right on the cue. Okay, here we're gonna have Greg apply those same fundamentals of marksmanship correctly. Put them all together and let's see what that looks like. Great, now we're gonna have Greg put the weight on his heels instead of the ball of his feet, stand straight up. This is what you should not do. Notice the difference in how much harder it is for him to manage the recoil. Front sight, press. Front sight, press. Smooth.
Okay, so we've got a Glock 19 and we've got an old Smith & Wesson Model 1038 revolver. Just showing the difference in grip and trigger between them. On the semi-automatics, as Matt described, we've got high thumbs and the trigger finger, and you're squeezing through, and it's a short trigger pull. On the revolver, it's a little different. We've got thumb over thumb in a grip such as this. And as you pull the trigger back and keep the sights aligned, you want to roll the trigger. What you don't want to do is get on target and snap the trigger. You want to roll it and keep your sights aligned for a nice smooth trigger pull.
One additional point with the revolver here, Greg is shooting that in double action mode. If he was to cock the hammer, put all that potential energy inside those springs, it would result in a lighter trigger press, and that's called single action. Double versus single. Single action is a lighter trigger pull.
Matt, we want to thank our sponsor, Plumstead Arms. They're very generous in their donations to the channel and keeping us going. So we've been to the range. We've learned about grip, stance, sight alignment, trigger press, follow through, breathing. If there's anything else that you folks want to see, put it down in the comments. Remember to like and subscribe, and thanks for joining us today.
See you at the range.